Indeed, we move on to sports. Here's Olumide Macaulay. Olumide.
Thank you, Ijama. Welcome to Sports News. We start with tennis. Rafael Nadal's 11-year, 41-match winning streak at the Barcelona Open was ended with a quarterfinal defeat by fellow Spaniard Nicolas Almagro. The world number one had eased through the first set, but after losing the second on a tie-break, was broken twice in the decider. Meanwhile, Ernest Gulbis and Kei Nishikori have booked their places in the semifinals of the Barcelona Open. Gulbis defeated Timurus Gabishvili 6-1, 6-4 to set up a last-four clash with Nishikori, who outclassed Marin Cilic 6-1, 6-3 in the quarterfinals. Away from tennis, Nigeria's impressive run at the 2014 WAFU Under-17 tournament holding in Togo comes to an end as the Golden Eaglets fell 3-1 penalties to Benin in the semi-final. The Golden Eaglets' second-half substitute, Suleiman Abdullahi, cancelled Benin's Adamu Nasiru early minute in the lead to bring the final score to 1-1. And finally, in basketball, Marcus Aldridge delivered another scintillating performance, and the Portland Trail Blazers defeated the Houston Rockets 112-105 to take a 2-0 lead in their Western Conference quarterfinal series. Aldridge made 43 points and 8 rebounds to win his first duel with Rockets center Dwight Howard, who paired 32 points with 14 rebounds. That's it on Sports News. The News at 10 continues just now.
Now, the worsening humanitarian crisis in Darfur was the main agenda of the United Nations Security Council meeting in New York. The president of the Security Council, Professor Joy Ogu, called for the adoption of this agenda in line with the provision of the rules of procedure of the United Nations. Our correspondent at the United Nations headquarters in New York, Benga Ashiru, reports.
The United Nations Security Council rose to the 7,059th meeting, with the President of the UN Security Council, Professor Joy Ogu, immediately calling for the adoption of the UN resolution on the deteriorating situation in Darfur.
The provisional agenda for this meeting is reports of the Secretary General on the Sudan and South Sudan.
Now time for a periodic review of the UN mission in Darfur.
Deployed in the region is a pro-government militia known as the RSF, Rapid Support Force. This has contributed to further endangering the civilian population, exposing them to significant risks, and in particular in certain areas of the north and south of Darfur. Violence and the abuses attributed to this militia include the targeting of civilians, the burning and looting of villages, pillaging of property, and cattle rustling. At the same time, the rebel groups that have not signed the DDPD have stepped up their attacks against government positions, and in particular in the north of Darfur, in the area of Jebel Mara, and sporadically in some parts of South Darfur. As a response, the Sudanese armed forces have stepped up their operations. They have moved to aerial bombardments that have led to losses of civilian life and displacement of populations, and in particular on the 19th and 27th of February, when the Sudanese armed forces, with the support of this militia, have launched an operation in an area known as Gunya, some 50 kilometers to the southeast of Nyala.
In spite of the alarming security challenge in Darfur, the Sudanese representative to the UN expresses a firm belief that the UN peace plan was a welcome bailout from the decades-long crisis ravaging Darfur. Now, while the UN Security Council upholds its Resolution 2148, which made provision for national dialogue and a call to all the warring factions in Darfur to lay down their arms, what seems clearly at stake is the loss of civilian lives and a total massive displacement of civilian population in Darfur. About 30,000 to 40,000 of the people have fled their homes to refugee camps, and about two-thirds of these people are yet to find their way back home. Now, the warring factions that are yet to sign the peace accord in Darfur have even stepped up operations against civilians in this area. And now the massive restriction by these warring factions has hampered the UN military operations to protect civilian lives in Darfur. Now, the big question is, will the UN Security Council be able to come up with an effective peace plan to stem the cycle of violence in Darfur? And now also, would the warring factions give up their long thirst for the gold deposits besides the power struggle? From the United Nations headquarters, New York, Benga Ashiru, reporting for Channels Television News.
And the main news again. Nigeria has remained top among most affected countries in Africa in spite of the global decline in malaria fatalities. The Nigerian Film and Video Censors Board has put on hold the release of the Biafran war-based movie Half of a Yellow Sun. And the President has held discussions with the former Commonwealth Secretary-General Emeka Anyaoku on national security and the nation's image abroad. Well, that's the news at 10 tonight. Thanks so much for staying with us. Metrofile is up next, followed by Focus on Africa, so do join us for that. I'm Ijoma Wenyato. Good night.